not really only the leadership topic is very essential and crucial to all of us, where everybody is obviously passionate about it as you joined, but also the remote part, which obviously covers now day to day our challenges. But first off, let me start a little bit and continue about where I'm coming from as responsible person or accountable person for IT infrastructure and operations. I'm really passionate about bringing cultures together to generate value, because most likely one culture, and we see that, is really helping the own culture and is really used to work in the same time zone and the same culture with the same personalities, with the same style of management and leadership. Whereas a strength and a culture, a global corporate culture, can be very much appreciate a collaborative approach across cultures. Bringing the strength of different cultures together can make a difference and is very unique to a corporate and to an organization. I was born and raised in Germany, in Baden-Württemberg. I was working a long time in automotive manufacturing, as you all know, most likely. And my heart goes to Michigan. So hi, Mike. Hi, Pete. I saw you there. So this is where I gained a lot of international experience and also leading international teams. In the automotive industry, there's a certain home in Michigan, as you all know. And the strength is, as I said, to bring cultures together where an organizational culture can benefit from. And actually, what will guide us through is a personal kind of leadership mantra. Through the presentation, I'll always come back to that. And this is for me called FEED. When you look back to certain challenges and take COVID, remote work as a challenge or as an example, where you need to convince people of a different way of working. I mean, all of us certainly do have not only experiences throughout the last or past most recent month, even before, that's why we're here together. But many organizations, like I've been working in the past years, there is not the real remote work culture embedded in their DNA like we have it. So there is something where you have to bring a little bit, I wouldn't call it visionary, but a really changed approach towards a future state. So you gotta be clear with the future state, where this organization should be in terms of collaboration, leadership, culture. And this is kind of the future setting. Of course, the future setting is around where you want to be. The nice island there, far away, but you always have this palm on your view. You always have this in your focus. But then you gotta get ambassadors. You gotta get always ambassadors at your side. So you gotta engage the right people at the right time and make them ambassadors, make them believe in your vision. And this is around how you approach them. This is around approach them in a timely manner. And this is also here the cultural thing really starts. You gotta approach people differently in different cultures. You have cultures, we'll come back to that later, which you can easier engage, and you have cultures which are hard to engage. And this is something crucial because you need ambassadors. And to connect that to the actually empowerment pieces, it's not that you have ambassadors who will follow you. And personally, you gotta educate leaders, and don't be afraid of that, because you have that guiding coalition in the change language, which is essential to come to the very last point, and this is deliver. And my American friends do know my wording, which is a little bit more direct than the JDI from Nike, the just do it. I like the more American way, just do it. You all know that probably. But at a certain point, you gotta say, JFDI, just do it now. And this is only possible when you have those ambassadors, when you have those leaders, those change leaders with you, which you engaged or who you engage at the right point of time, with the right vision, with the right future state. First off, Sarah, we'll take the remote work challenge as an example. I remember a day, it was end of the last weekend in January. I've been in Munich, and when I was entering the hotel on a Thursday, there came the news around COVID for the very first time to me. And I was a little bit concerned if this affects Germany or Europe the same way than Asia. It obviously did at that point of time. What happens with the economy? To be quite honest, I'm responsible for IT. At that point of time, I didn't even think of what could this mean to me as an IT leader. I was more worried about the economy, what is around the European business, how would this affect Knauf with a global distributed manufacturing, pretty local and decentral cooperation. And it was like the week after, immediately, I had my show fixed with my with my Asia Pacific regional manager, and he said, "Well, Ronnie, it's getting here really serious already, really serious." And this was my first really touching point where we said, "Okay, we got a prep." And this indication led to something totally different, because I had to start with the leadership, with the future state from an Asian culture. Technically, from an infrastructure perspective, it was quite a challenge because the company now doesn't really have that culture to remote work. We evenly launched the general agreement for remote working just 1.5 years ago. So this was pretty new. And then we had to start, which you can see here from the Lewis model, at the yellow side. And the yellow side, this is a reactive culture. A reactive culture means that usually they have some key competencies, strength, weaknesses, like we all have. But one thing is that they're reactive. They're pretty much good listeners. And they will never interrupt you. But at this point of time, you need to get as much information out of that culture as possible. So we had to engage them, interview them around their experiences to get them in this kind of target setting for Europe and North America and Latin America later on as much as possible. We had got to take benefit from their experience up to that point, which was a totally new situation for them, obviously. But here, on the other hand side, when you move towards the blue color linear active, where you usually plan step by step, you do this in a clear, structured way, moving forward, project planning and everything. You know that we need a PM and we need a resource manager and we need a issue manager and a PMO. You are in a shape where people are clearly focusing on the planning. First off, plan. And then you got to move up to the multi-active. The multi-active people are a little bit more, let's call it emotional. They're more like, hey, this is pretty much important what Ronnie is saying. And by the way, oh, we got a new business there. This is cool. Okay, oh, go back to that. So you more have to work on the focus. And when we go now to feed and take this example, when you talk about a different future set in terms of global leadership, it is when you work remotely, which we started at that point of time really hard because we couldn't get together anymore. We really stopped in February already global travels. It's hard to get that global vision and the future set of working across to all the cultures. You got to really work with tools. And the tools, not from a technology standpoint only, but different, let's call it methods. The one is that you write regulations, which is hard. And we call that guidelines, how to behave and how to act. But you gotta do that for the one culture. And we come later back. This is also not only the cultural diversity, this is also the generation, the age, which plays a crucial role in there. So it's multi-dimensional. The next thing is what we kind of do here. If you don't come together face by face, if you can't do that, the engagement in critical situation it's important that you gotta be visible. You gotta be visible if you transfer something globally across cultures. You gotta write on top, but it's the visibility which counts. Because the cultural setting there, if you have only voice, is making such a huge difference. Remember, when you or compare it, when you sit together and when you talk about serious topics in the past, even when we had crucial or strategy workshops, usually people were flying to the headquarters, sitting together, and they did their, thumb sign or sign the strategic paper to kind of underline your commitment. When you do this commitment only verbally, per voice, you lose a lot of traction. You have a lot of friction. You lose some commitment. And when you lose commitment, it's potentially a loss of trust. And that is dangerous when you want to move from A to B, which is a future set. And then once you have at least the engagement, which we kind of in this example did pretty much on the daily side in Skype and Teams meetings, how do you empower regional managers to talk to business unit heads? And this is pretty much a two-way street. You gotta have the commitment from the top level and place IT in that example as a business enabler, as a business partner. And last but not least, if you talk to those different cultures at the end of the day, and at a certain point, you gotta, as an example, you gotta prepare people using a desktop every day, sitting in accounting, and make sure that they can work tomorrow from home. How are you gonna do that? Notebooks can't be delivered because they're coming right from China where production is already down. No way, no shipment, nothing. So you gotta make sure that they're ready to carry out their desktops and go back home. So technically a lot of steps to be done, but really make sure that you collaborate with the business and be close by and motivate key people, key ambassadors to deliver that. And a good example is that we had one guy in Australia, a field service engineer, who was driving 2 hours with a computer, with a desktop computer, to an MD managing director, really 2 hours, even past one gate where he wasn't allowed to pass to get this computer there. And you gotta honor and you're gonna award them. Bring them attention, give them face time. And this is, for example, for an Asia Pacific, or especially when you look to those cultures, this is pretty rare, they're hierarchy oriented. If they all of a sudden see, okay, this is appreciated, this is something new, this will help growing. You come ultimately back to the empowerment piece. So this is just one example. And I don't know who's familiar with this Lewis model. The Lewis model is just a guideline, but it helps to understand. I mean, it was developed, I think, early mid-90s, but it helps to understand that it's not only that you see the Asia guys or people or humans as the more reactive and listening people. It's also helpful to say, okay, if you engage them earlier, you can give them easier a voice. Like we did, we interviewed them. What was your experience the first weeks? Let's learn in Europe, North America, Southern America about it. Let's share, give them a voice. You immediately move them a little bit towards the green area. And this is one key empowerment model that you give the people in yellow or lighter green, orange, more voice. They're per se, per DNA, more listeners. And when you go even further, this global leadership piece, and bring this other dimension into the game, which is more the generation then, the aging baby boomer generation X, millennium generation Y and Z, This is a totally different way per se how they communicate. In fact, we go back a little bit. There is a trend that younger people love that face-to-face as well because it generates more commitment. But overall, there is a huge change in terms of how fast will be communicated and how fast a dialogue will run. So how does this affect the leadership? With regards to this remote work, let's stick with that a second. Young people are used to work with IMs, instant messaging. It has to work instantly. I remember in my previous company, Mike, you probably remember as well, when we launched Jammer, all of a sudden at that point of time, usually you get an email, right afterwards you get an email, hey, did you read that email already? And now on top Jammer, hey, I put something in there, did you see that? So you have all these instant things where you all of a sudden don't lead anymore an organization or people, you manage tasks. And this is dangerous. This is really dangerous. Coming back to the very first point, your ambassadors, when you want to create a global cultures, need to be leaders. So we got to make sure that with those more communication channels, collaboration channels, we really stick to that level that we can make an impact on people and an impact on the organization and provide value add. With remote work, that means that you plan moving forward, having those tools working everywhere and communicate about that change that remote work will start next week in all potential medias. Because the baby boomers, they want to see their emails with PDF attachments. This is how they work for the past 40 years. It doesn't change just because remote work or Ronnie thinks Jammer is cool. That doesn't work. You're gonna apply still that rule. When you engage them, you gotta make sure that you ramp up the communication, because you have email, because you have that what we are doing here, voice and be visible. Then you have this Yammer on the go. You have video stream to share, follow-up guidelines in videos so everybody can really look back to that, what's happened there. So it's a different style to show the future state. It's a different way of engaging them. And then the empowerment. This is getting with multiple or across generation, this is getting really crucial. You gotta make sure, or what I learned is that you can only empower somebody and bring this person into action when this person really has the right competencies. And this is hard to change or implement remotely, because changing something or handing over or bringing competencies in, like, hey, you regional IT manager, you're now in the role of being responsible to talk to the Asia business unit lead and make sure that remote leadership works in Asia. He didn't have that competencies beforehand. So there is a lot of stakeholder management ahead of time required to align with managing directors, to align with his local legal entity chief, make sure that the responsibilities we hand over to people are matching to the competencies he or she will gain. Otherwise, it won't work. And this is remote, far more complex. You gotta do that by calls as a plan, as a kind of preparation. But it's crucial when it's coming to competencies, do this like we do now. It's really the even an email won't help in any culture. It's around look in your eyes. This is still the human factor on the empowerment. And when you come to the delivery or execution, when you achieve that empowerment, which you hear already, which is the crucial point, this empowerment and the engagement, these two steps, then you shape a culture. Because ultimately, when you communicate about something new, when you get the ambassadors and you get somebody buying into that new way, you ultimately are delivering in execution something from A to B, which we call this is a change. And this creates another culture because as our experience shows from the past decades, we just move from the late 90s into that remote work. IBM has started and going back to office 3 years ago, I think, because the face-to-face was pretty much more important. And now we're all about the remote work again. So it's all about those changes. And this is important. It's a culture in the organization which has to be in the DNA that we accept change. And this is hard. It's easier with younger people, of course, because you create this dynamic and you see this diversity of tools. You see this diversity of how we communicate in the younger generations because we work in clouds, we work leadership. Now, remember or think ahead, maybe 10 to 15 years. The people in the grade or in the high school today, or in the grade 10 to 13 in Germany, those are our future leaders. And they did now work all with teams and everything. In the past 10 years, this was only in the university. Now in schools, they work with teams, with Yammer, with Gmail and all this stuff, G Drive. So they're now really starting pretty much earlier. This means they have a different leadership style already in a totally different age, like we started with leadership experiences. And this is really, truly a challenge. This will become a challenge in how we lead. You gotta pick the right tool, you gotta pick the right way of communication, which is fit for purpose. It needs to be fit for the priority and for the audience. And then again, it's on the age. We see here, and this is not a rule, what is on the right-hand side. But my observation throughout the last years was really that on the lower end of that graph, we see that the baby boomer generation and the Generation X is used to more like emails, or I store something on the intranet, on the SharePoint, on a shared drive, whatever, and I can get you access to it. All good, but still I prefer email. But what happens then, or what happened, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years, is more like this instant. It's coming to the urgency, right? That we want to have instantly a feedback. And this is where the entire model shifts. This means that not only the culture is the important thing, we're getting more and more to that point that the generation is leading that, because there is the even much more bigger impact. This is what I learned in the past 5 to 6 years, honestly. Especially how to enable people to work remotely, giving a lot of guidance, communications out there from IT globally to all regions, basically. And when you communicate that future state, it's really around, or let's start with a feed. With this future state, you gotta think positive. And with this really engage people, it's around the why. What is in for me? I want to engage, I need somebody and I need his or her engagement. Then I need to really transmit a why story. Why is it good for you to be in there? Why is it good for you to lead with me that baby? And if you then really empower, it's kind of the how. How are we going to do that together? Giving the right competencies, giving the right responsibilities to the people. And never give up if you have somebody fighting against that. This is normal in terms of changes. Never give up. And deliver is then really the what. What are we going to do? And you see, this is also this why, how, what. It's kind of that triangle. The target state is important, and then the why, the value, the benefit for people, of course, the how and the what. And last but not least, what guides me personally always is really to think positive.
Is there still some time for some more comment?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, hi, my name is Herbert. Hey, Ronnie, first of all, congratulations to your presentation. And I have to say, I'm saying that, based on the fact that I manage, teams globally, remotely for the biggest part of my career. I'm a firm believer in this work from anywhere type of environment and type of setup. Because really, I mean, when you think about the benefits, right? I mean, there's benefits for both the employees, but there's also significant benefits for the employer, whether it's, gaining productivity, whether it's, the flexibility, whether it's, employee commitment, employee loyalty. I mean, these are the experiences that I've made that, you get much more of that, if you manage people in a flexible way, if you allow them to either work from remote, from home, or they come to the office, okay, there's significant benefits. And I also agree to what has been said is the bigger challenge, the biggest challenge is to make this work, to make it a success is really, on the manager's side, right? Because, managing remote, managing virtual teams, it's a different kind of effort. It's more effort. But as you said, Ronnie, it really pays back, right? But what we have to accept and what has just been mentioned by, I think, Peter as well, and what you confirmed is we have to accept the fact that, when people work from remote, they're not necessarily doing this 9 to 5 or whatever, right? But we have to grant them the freedom to be more flexible in how they work, right? I mean, for my teams, for my people, at the end of the day, I don't care whether you work night shift, you work day shift, or you do it in whatever fashion and manner. What really matters to me is what you deliver, right? So, granting people the freedom to work flexibly, but to make them understand that, there are objectives, there are deliverables that we need to have, that we need to keep up with. That is the most important thing. Do they do it in 3 hours in a day? Do they do it in 10 hours in a day? It shouldn't matter to us, really, right? So I think this different mindset makes a big difference. And I think, great managers, great leaders lead the people to productivity no matter what setup. Old-fashioned style, not so great managers and leaders, they insist that they can see the people and they can see the people from 9 to 5. And that's the most important thing. Or ideally, they can see the people from 7 to 8 in the evening, because then they have the impression that they do a great job, which is not necessarily the case, right? So anyway, this was more a comment. As I said, kudos to what you said. I completely agree, because that is my experience for many years, managing, leading global teams, virtual teams, you name it. It's a great concept. And I just hope that, we will not see, all these opportunities to disappear the more that people start to forget about the impact from COVID. I really hope so.
I'm with you here, totally. And thanks for that great comment, actually.